The champagne glass caught the ballroom lights as Mira raised it above her head. I watched from our assigned table, fork halfway to my mouth with overpriced salmon that tasted like cardboard. The Riverside Hotel's grand ballroom buzzed with the usual corporate energy, forced laughter, clinking glasses, and the kind of conversations that happen when people pretend to enjoy each other's company. "Attention, everyone," Mira's voice carried across the room with practiced confidence. She had always been good at commanding attention. 23 years of marriage had taught me that much. The microphone squealed feedback as she adjusted it, her smile bright enough to power the chandelier above us. I set down my fork. Something felt wrong. Mira hadn't mentioned giving any speech tonight. As the company's HR director, she occasionally spoke at these events, but she always told me beforehand. Always. "I have some incredible news to share with all of you," she continued, her voice steady and clear. The room settled into expectant silence. Even the catering staff paused their plate clearing to listen. My stomach tightened. Whatever was coming, I could feel it building like pressure before a storm. After 15 years with Meridian Industries, I've been offered an amazing opportunity. She paused for effect, scanning the crowd with theatrical timing. "I've accepted a senior vice president position with our new West Coast division." Polite applause rippled through the room. I forced my hands together, confusion clouding my thoughts. West Coast? We lived in Riverton, Ohio. We had a mortgage, neighbors, a life here. When had she interviewed for anything on the West Coast? "The position requires immediate relocation to San Francisco," Mira continued, her smile never wavering. "And I'm thrilled to announce that I'll be working directly under our CEO, Corbin Findler, to build this new division from the ground up." The applause grew louder. I watched Corbin stand at the head table, his silver hair perfectly styled, his $1,000 suit immaculate. He raised his own glass toward Mira with a smile that looked far too personal for a professional moment. My hands stopped clapping. The pieces weren't just falling into place, they were crashing down like an avalanche. "The best part," Mira said, her voice rising with excitement, "is that Corbin has arranged for my relocation to begin next week. We'll be flying out together Monday morning to start this incredible new chapter." The room erupted in congratulations. People stood, whistled, cheered. I remained seated, watching my wife of 23 years announce the end of our marriage to 200 people while I learned about it along with the catering staff. She hadn't said, "We're moving." She hadn't said, "Brooks and I." She said she was flying out with Corbin, our boss, the man who had been working late with her 3 nights a week for the past 6 months. I didn't interrupt. I didn't storm out. I didn't cause a scene. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. 6 months ago, the board of directors had asked me for something. As Meridian's logistics manager, I had access to financial routing codes that they needed for an internal audit. Specifically, they wanted the master key to Corbin's discretionary spending accounts, what the company called executive flexibility budgets. I had dragged my feet on providing it, not out of loyalty to Corbin, but because I knew that once I handed over those codes, someone was going to get fired. The audit was clearly targeting irregularities in executive spending. I just hadn't realized how irregular things had become. Under the table, hidden by the white tablecloth and the continued applause for my wife's announcement, I opened my email and found the draft I had saved 6 months ago. The one addressed to the entire board of directors. The one containing every access code, routing number, and authorization key for Corbin's private expense accounts. My thumb hovered over the send button as Mira continued her speech. "This opportunity represents everything I've worked toward," she was saying. "A chance to build something new, to grow professionally, and to explore new horizons with an incredible team." Incredible team. Right. I pressed send. The email disappeared from my drafts folder and landed in 7 board members' inboxes simultaneously. Each of them would receive not just the access codes, but also a detailed breakdown of every expense account, every authorization protocol, and every financial pathway that Corbin had used for the past 2 years, including the promotion budget that Mira was currently celebrating. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and picked up my champagne glass. Around me, people were standing and applauding. Mira beamed from the podium, soaking in the attention. Corbin looked like a man who had just won the lottery. They had no idea what was about to hit them. "To new beginnings," Mira declared, raising her glass one final time. I raised mine as well, though I doubted we were toasting the same thing. The applause began to die down as people returned to their seats. Mira handed the microphone back to the evening's host and started making her way back toward our table. She moved through the crowd like a celebrity, accepting congratulations and handshakes from colleagues who probably had no idea they were witnessing the most elaborate public betrayal I had ever seen. Corbin intercepted her halfway across the room. Even from a distance, I could see the way he touched her arm, the way she leaned into him as they spoke. Nothing overtly inappropriate, they were too smart for that, but intimate enough that anyone paying attention would understand exactly what kind of working relationship they had developed. I had been paying attention for months. The late meetings, the business trips that required overnight stays, the way Mira's phone buzzed with text messages at all hours, messages she always claimed were work emergencies. The new clothes, the new perfume, the sudden interest in fitness and appearance that coincided perfectly with Corbin's arrival as CEO 18 months ago. I had suspected. Now I knew. My phone buzzed against my leg. A text message from someone at the head table, probably one of the board members checking their email during the dinner break. Then another buzz. Then another. Across the room, I watched board member Patricia Hendricks pull out her phone. Even from 30 feet away, I could see her expression change as she read my email. She leaned over to whisper something to David Chen, the board chairman, who immediately reached for his own phone. The dominoes were beginning to fall. Mira finally reached our table, her cheeks flushed with excitement and champagne. "Can you believe it?" she said, sliding into her chair beside me. "I mean, I've been hoping for something like this for years, but when Corbin approached me last week with the offer, I could barely contain myself." Last week. She had known for a week and hadn't mentioned it. Not a word. "Congratulations," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Quite a surprise." "I wanted to tell you sooner," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But Corbin insisted we keep it confidential until tonight. You know how these corporate announcements work." I knew exactly how they worked. I also knew that legitimate job offers didn't require secret meetings, overnight trips to scout locations, and the kind of personal attention that Corbin had been lavishing on my wife for months. "When do you leave?" I asked. "Monday morning. I know it's fast, but this kind of opportunity doesn't come around twice. Corbin says the West Coast market is exploding right now, and if we don't move quickly, we'll miss the window." "We." She kept saying we. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Patricia Hendricks. I declined it, but not before noticing that she was no longer at the head table. Neither was David Chen, or Michael Torres, the board's financial oversight chair. They were reading my email, they were accessing Corbin's accounts, and they were discovering exactly how he had been funding my wife's promotion. "Brooks?" Mira was looking at me with concern. "You seem distracted. Are you okay with all this?" Was I okay with my wife announcing our divorce at a company party while declaring her intention to run away with her boss? Was I okay with learning that my marriage was over at the same time as the waitstaff? "I'm fine," I said. "Just processing everything." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I know it's a lot to take in. But think about it. This could be a fresh start for both of us. Maybe you could transfer to the West Coast division too. Corbin mentioned there might be opportunities in logistics." The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. She was actually suggesting that I follow them to California so I could watch my wife's affair play out in a new time zone. That's thoughtful of him, I managed. He really is amazing, Mira said, her eyes drifting back toward the head table where Corbin was deep in conversation with someone I didn't recognize. I've learned so much working with him. He has this incredible vision for the future of the company. I bet he did. And apparently that vision included my wife. The lights in the ballroom suddenly dimmed, then brightened again. Someone was adjusting the presentation equipment at the front of the room. The evening's program was supposed to continue with quarterly reports and recognition awards, but something had changed. Instead of the scheduled presenter, David Chen was walking toward the podium with a laptop and a very serious expression. Patricia Hendricks and Michael Torres flanked him, both carrying folders that definitely hadn't been part of the original program. Behind them, I could see other board members gathering near the head table, their faces grim. Corbin noticed the commotion and started moving toward the podium, but David Chen was already at the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please." His voice carried the authority of someone who had spent 30 years running board meetings. The room quieted immediately. "I apologize for the interruption, but the board has just received some information that requires immediate attention." Mira's hand tightened on mine. "What's going on?" she whispered. I shrugged, though my heart was pounding like a drum. Board stuff, probably. David Chen connected his laptop to the projection system. The large screen behind him flickered to life, displaying what looked like a financial spreadsheet. Even from our table, I could see columns of numbers, dates, and transaction codes. "Earlier this evening," Chen continued, "we received access to certain financial records that have raised serious questions about executive spending practices at Meridian Industries." Corbin was pushing through the crowd now, his face flushed with anger or panic. "David, this isn't the appropriate venue for— Mr. Findler, please return to your seat." Chen's voice cut through Corbin's protest like a blade. "Security will escort you if necessary." The word security sent a ripple of tension through the room. This wasn't a routine board announcement. This was an ambush. Chen clicked to the next slide. The projection showed a detailed breakdown of expenses from something labeled Executive Promotion Budget, Confidential. Each line item was highlighted in red, with amounts that made me whistle under my breath. Relocation expenses, $47,000. Executive housing allowance, $23,000. Professional development retreat, $31,000. The list went on for 2 full pages. "These expenses," Chen said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom, "were authorized by CEO Corbin Findler over the past 6 months, using discretionary funds that require board approval for any expenditure over $5,000. Mira's face had gone pale. She was staring at the screen like she was reading her own obituary. "The promotion and relocation package announced this evening," Chen continued, "represents a total expenditure of over $200,000 in unauthorized spending. Furthermore, our preliminary review suggests that this position was created without board knowledge or approval." The room was silent now. Even the catering staff had stopped moving. Chen clicked to another slide. This one showed a series of hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and travel expenses. All of them showed 2 names, Corbin Findler and Mira Carvin. "Additionally," Chen said, "these expenses appear to document a pattern of personal spending disguised as business expenses, including multiple overnight trips, luxury accommodations, and private dining that occurred outside of any legitimate business purpose." Mira jerked her hand away from mine, like I had burned her. "Brooks," she whispered urgently, "did you know about this?" I met her eyes with the most innocent expression I could manage. "Know about what?" "The board investigation, the financial review. Did you—" She stopped, her face cycling through confusion, realization, and finally, fury. "You gave them the access codes." I didn't deny it. There was no point. "6 months ago," I said quietly, "they asked me for those codes. I've been sitting on the request ever since. Tonight seemed like the perfect time to fulfill my obligation to the board. Her mouth opened and closed, like she was trying to form words that wouldn't come. Around us, the ballroom had erupted in whispered conversations as people processed what they were seeing. On stage, David Chen was delivering the final blow. Effective immediately, Mr. Findler's access to all company accounts is suspended, pending a full investigation. The promotion announced this evening is rescinded, and all associated expenses will be recovered through payroll deduction and legal action if necessary. Corbin had stopped trying to reach the podium. He stood in the middle of the ballroom like a man watching his house burn down, his perfect composure finally cracking. The board will be conducting individual interviews with all parties involved, Chen concluded. This matter will be handled with full transparency and appropriate consequences. The microphone clicked off. The projection screen went dark. And just like that, my wife's new life evaporated in front of 200 witnesses. The ballroom slowly came back to life as people began talking, gathering their things, and heading for the exits. Nobody wanted to stick around for the aftermath of what they had just witnessed. Mira sat frozen in her chair, staring at the now empty stage. "You destroyed everything," she whispered. "No," I said, standing up and straightening my tie. "You destroyed everything. I just made sure everyone else found out about it." I walked away from the table, leaving my wife sitting alone in her ruined evening gown, surrounded by the wreckage of her carefully planned betrayal. Our marriage had lasted exactly as long as it took the board to read my email. I drove home through empty streets, my hands steady on the wheel despite the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. Riverton looked different at midnight, smaller, quieter, like a town that had given up trying to impress anyone. Streetlights illuminated closed storefronts and empty parking lots, remnants of better economic times when Meridian Industries wasn't the only major employer keeping the place alive. Our house sat at the end of Maple Street, a 1970s colonial that we had bought when we still believed in things like joint checking accounts and shared dreams. The mortgage had 12 years left on it. I wondered if I would be making those payments alone. Mira's car wasn't in the driveway. She was probably still at the hotel, dealing with the fallout from the evening's revelations. Or maybe she was with Corbin, planning their next move. Either way, I had the house to myself for the first time in months. I poured 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my home office, staring at the computer screen that displayed my email inbox. 47 new messages since I had sent the access codes to the board. Most were automated responses, but several were from colleagues who had witnessed the evening's events. The first was from Tom Bradley, a fellow manager who had worked at Meridian for nearly as long as I had. "Brooks, holy shit, man. Did you know that was coming? Call me when you get this." The second was from Patricia Hendricks herself. "Mr. Carvin, thank you for providing the requested access codes. Your cooperation with the board's investigation is appreciated. We will be in touch regarding next steps." The third was from someone I didn't recognize immediately, Rita Beck, one of Mira's friends from the legal department. "Brooks, I think we should talk. There are things about tonight that you need to understand. Call me." I deleted all 3 without responding. Whatever conversations were coming could wait until I had figured out my own next moves. The bourbon burned pleasantly as I reviewed everything I knew about Corbin's financial irregularities. As logistics manager, I had access to shipping records, vendor payments, and expense routing that most employees never saw. I had been tracking unusual patterns for months without fully understanding what they meant. Now, I understood perfectly. The business trips to scout West Coast locations had been romantic getaways. The professional development expenses had paid for luxury hotels and expensive dinners. The relocation budget had been Corbin's way of funding my wife's new life without using his own money. He had been stealing from the company to finance his affair with my wife. And she had been a willing participant in every fraudulent expense report. My phone rang at 12:47 a.m. Mira's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring. She called back immediately, then again. On the fourth attempt, I finally answered. "Brooks, we need to talk." Her voice was strained, exhausted. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Can I come home?" Home. Interesting choice of words for someone who had just announced her relocation to California. "It's your house too," I said. "For now." The line went quiet for several seconds. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up before I could respond. I used the time to prepare, not for a conversation, there was nothing left to discuss, but for whatever strategy session she had planned with her legal friend, Rita Beck. Because that's what this was. Mira didn't do anything without calculating the angles first. I set up a small digital recorder on the bookshelf, hidden behind a picture frame, but positioned to capture audio from anywhere in the room. If Mira wanted to talk, I wanted evidence of everything she said. Her headlights swept across the living room windows at exactly 1:07 a.m. She had always been punctual, even when planning betrayals. She came through the front door like she was entering a crime scene, careful, alert, ready for anything. Her evening gown had been replaced by jeans and a sweater, but she still looked like someone who had spent the night in crisis management mode. "Where do you want to do this?" she asked without preamble. "In here is fine." I gestured toward the office chairs I had arranged facing each other. Neutral territory, with the recorder positioned to catch every word. She sat down and studied my face like she was trying to read a foreign language. "You planned this whole thing." "I responded to a board request for information, that's all." 6 months after they asked for it. On the same night, I announced my promotion. Timing seemed appropriate. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You destroyed my career, Brooks. Do you understand that? I'll never work in corporate HR again, not after tonight. You destroyed your career when you started sleeping with the CEO and stealing company money to fund your affair." "We didn't steal anything." The words came out sharper than she had intended. Those were legitimate business expenses. Overnight trips to hotels where no business was conducted, dinners for two at restaurants 300 miles from any company office, a relocation package for a position that didn't exist. She was quiet for a moment, probably calculating how much I actually knew versus how much I was guessing. "The position was real," she said finally. "Corbin was building a West Coast division. The board just wasn't ready to approve the expansion yet. So you decided to spend their money anyway." "We decided to be proactive, to show initiative, to prove that the opportunity was worth the investment." The lies came so easily that I almost admired her technique. She had probably been practicing this speech for months, preparing for the day when someone asked uncomfortable questions. "And the romantic relationship?" I asked. "Was that part of showing initiative too?" Her composure cracked slightly. "That's between you and me." Actually, it became between me, you, Corbin, the board of directors, and 200 dinner guests when you announced your plans to run away together. I never said, "You said you were relocating with Corbin. You said you were flying out together Monday morning. You said you were starting a new chapter. What exactly did I misunderstand?" She stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the empty street. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The company is changing. Corbin brought new energy, new ideas. Working with him made me feel alive again." "Alive enough to embezzle $200,000? "We didn't embezzle anything." She spun around, her voice rising. "Every expense was approved through proper channels. Proper channels that required board oversight for anything over $5,000, oversight that never happened." She was trapped, and she knew it. The financial evidence was ironclad. The board had everything they needed to prove fraud, and Mira's own announcement had provided them with motive. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "I want you to understand that your new life just ended before it started." "And then what? You get revenge and feel better about yourself?" "I get justice. There's a difference." She sat back down, her shoulders sagging with defeat. The board is going to press charges, aren't they? Probably. Corbin says he can fix this. He has connections, lawyers. He thinks we can make this go away. Corbin is about to be unemployed and facing federal fraud charges. His connections aren't going to help him, and they're certainly not going to help you. So what happens now? I'd been thinking about that question all evening. Now you call a lawyer, a good one, and you hope that cooperating with the investigation might reduce your sentence. Sentence? Her voice was barely a whisper. Did you think this was just going to be a slap on the wrist? You stole company money, Mira. You falsified expense reports. You participated in creating a fraudulent position. Those are felonies. The color drained from her face. I never meant for it to go this far. But you meant for it to go somewhere. You meant to leave me, leave our marriage, and start a new life with stolen money. She was crying now, though I suspected the tears were more about her situation than any genuine remorse. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry about all of it. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. My phone buzzed with a text message. Rita Beck again. Brooks, this is urgent. There are things about tonight that you need to know before you make any more moves. Call me immediately. I showed the message to Mira. Your friend seems to think there's more to this story. Mira's expression shifted from despair to something that looked like panic. Don't talk to Rita. Why not? Just don't. She doesn't understand the whole situation. What situation? The situation between you and me, between us and Corbin. She's going to try to make it more complicated than it needs to be. More complicated than embezzlement and adultery. I can't imagine how. Mira stood up abruptly. I should go. Where? Your relocation package just got canceled. I'll figure something out. She headed for the door, then stopped and turned back toward me. For what it's worth, I never wanted to hurt you. You just wanted to leave me. I wanted to be happy. At my expense. Literally. She left without another word, her footsteps echoing across the hardwood floors until the front door closed behind her. I sat in the silence for several minutes, processing everything she had said and everything she had avoided saying. The conversation had confirmed what I already knew. She was guilty. She knew she was guilty, and she was hoping that somehow Corbin could make the consequences disappear. What bothered me was her reaction to Rita Beck's message. Mira had looked genuinely frightened when I mentioned talking to her friend, like Rita knew something that could make the situation worse. I poured another bourbon and considered my options. I could ignore Rita's messages and let the board investigation run its course. Mira and Corbin would face whatever legal consequences came their way, and I would move on with my life. Or I could find out what Rita Beck was so urgent to tell me. The smart move was to stay out of it. I had already accomplished what I set out to do, expose the fraud and end my wife's affair. Getting more involved would only complicate things. But something in Mira's voice when she said, "Don't talk to Rita," made me think that the story wasn't over yet. I picked up my phone and dialed Rita's number. She answered on the first ring. Brooks? Thank God. We need to meet. When? Now, tonight. This can't wait until morning. Where? Finch's Bar on 5th Street. I'm already here. Finch's was the kind of place where people went to have conversations they didn't want overheard. Dark, quiet, and far enough from downtown that we weren't likely to run into any Meridian employees. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. Brooks? Rita's voice was tense. Don't tell anyone where you're going, and don't tell anyone we talked. The line went quiet. I finished my bourbon, grabbed my jacket, and headed back out into the night. Whatever Rita Beck wanted to tell me, it was important enough to drag her out of bed at 1:30 in the morning. I had a feeling that my wife's betrayal was about to get a lot more complicated. Finch's Bar occupied the ground floor of a brick building that had seen better decades. The neon sign flickered intermittently, casting red and blue shadows across the empty parking lot. At 1:45 a.m. on a Tuesday, the place should have been closed, but a dim light glowed through the front windows. I pushed through the heavy wooden door and found Rita Beck sitting alone in a corner booth, nursing what looked like her second or third whiskey. She had changed out of her evening wear into dark jeans and a black jacket, like she was dressed for a covert operation. Rita was one of those women who had perfected the art of looking professional and approachable simultaneously. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, the kind of smile that could disarm or intimidate depending on the situation. As Meridian's senior legal counsel, she had a reputation for being thorough, discreet, and absolutely ruthless when protecting the company's interests. Brooks. She gestured toward the empty seat across from her. Thanks for coming. I slid into the booth and caught the bartender's attention. Bourbon neat. Smart choice, Rita said. You're going to need it. The bartender delivered my drink and retreated to the far end of the bar, giving us the privacy that Rita had obviously arranged in advance. So, I said, taking a sip of bourbon that tasted significantly better than anything I could afford. What's so urgent that it couldn't wait until morning? Rita stared into her glass for several seconds before answering. What happened tonight? The board presentation? The financial evidence? The public exposure? That was just the opening move. Opening move in what? A much bigger game than you realize. I waited for her to continue, but she seemed to be weighing her words carefully. How much do you know about Corbin's background? She asked finally. He's been CEO for 18 months. Before that, he ran operations for a manufacturing company in Detroit. Clean record, good references, impressive turnaround experience. That's what his official biography says. And unofficially? Rita pulled a manila folder from her jacket and slid it across the table. Corbin Findler has been running the same scam for the past 10 years, different companies, different cities, but the same basic pattern. I opened the folder and found photocopies of newspaper articles, legal documents, and financial records. The headlines told a consistent story. CEO resigns amid financial irregularities. Executive fraud investigation leads to bankruptcy. Manufacturing company collapses after leadership scandal. 3 companies, Rita said quietly. Detroit, Phoenix, and Atlanta. Each time, Corbin arrived as a turnaround specialist, spent 18 to 24 months building relationships and gaining trust, then systematically looted executive accounts before disappearing. How is he not in prison? Because he's smart. He never steals enough to trigger federal attention, and he always has a fall guy ready to take the blame. Usually someone in middle management who had access to the accounts but not enough political protection to fight back. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Someone like me. Someone exactly like you. I flipped through the documents, recognizing patterns that were disturbingly familiar. Unauthorized expense accounts, romantic relationships with female employees, elaborate relocation schemes that never materialized. In Detroit, Rita continued, it was the logistics manager who got blamed for the missing funds. Phoenix, it was the operations director. Atlanta, the facilities manager. All of them middle-aged men with access to financial systems and no powerful allies to protect them. But tonight, I exposed him. I gave the board the evidence they needed. You gave them evidence of financial irregularities, but Corbin has been preparing for this moment since the day he arrived at Meridian. Rita reached into her jacket again and pulled out a second folder, this one thicker than the first. For the past 6 months, she said, Corbin has been building a case that you've been embezzling company funds, falsified shipping records, phantom vendor payments, unauthorized expense transfers. He has documentation going back over a year. That's impossible. I haven't stolen anything. Of course you haven't, but the evidence says otherwise. She opened the second folder and spread the contents across the table. Purchase orders with my authorization signature. Expense reports with my approval codes. bank routing slips that showed transfers to accounts I had never seen before. "These are forgeries," I said, studying the documents. "Very good forgeries. Good enough to convince a jury that you've been systematically stealing from Meridian Industries for the past 18 months. My bourbon tasted like acid. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because tomorrow morning, Corbin is going to walk into the board meeting with this evidence and claim that you've been framing him to cover your own crimes. The board will never believe that. Won't they? You had access to all the accounts. You had the authorization codes. You're the one who provided the evidence against Corbin, which makes you look like someone trying to deflect suspicion." I stared at the forged documents, trying to process the implications. He's been planning this for months. Since the day he arrived. Mira wasn't his first target, Brooks. She was his cover story. "What do you mean?" Rita finished her whiskey and signaled the bartender for another round. Corbin needed someone with access to financial systems and a reason to be bitter about the company, a middle manager with marital problems and a grudge against leadership. So he seduced my wife to create those problems? He seduced your wife to give him leverage over you. The affair was never about romance. It was about positioning you as the perfect fall guy. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Mira's sudden interest in working late, the mysterious business trips, the gradual cooling of our relationship that had pushed me toward resentment and isolation. "How long have you known about this?" I asked. "I started investigating Corbin 3 months ago when I noticed irregularities in legal expense reports. The deeper I dug, the more familiar the patterns became. Why didn't you go to the board?" "Because I needed proof, and because I needed to understand how deep the corruption went." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Brooks, Mira isn't just Corbin's lover. She's his partner." "Partner in what?" "In all of it. The embezzlement, the frame job, the escape plan. She's been helping him forge documents, manipulate records, and build the case against you." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. "That's impossible." Tonight, when the board exposed the evidence, she looked genuinely shocked. "She looked shocked because you moved faster than they expected. They were planning to let this run for another few months before triggering the investigation." "Why?" "Because the longer the theft continued, the more evidence they could manufacture against you. Tonight's revelation forced them to accelerate their timeline." Rita pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. "These are from Mira's phone," she said. "I've been monitoring her communications as part of my investigation." The messages were between Mira and someone listed as CF, obviously Corbin Findler. "Everything is ready for Phase 2, one message read. "Brooks took the bait perfectly." "Financial documents are in place," read another. "He won't know what hit him." "Timeline moved up," read the most recent message, sent just 2 hours ago. "Need to implement contingency plan immediately." I stared at the phone screen, reading my wife's words over and over. She was setting me up from the beginning. Not from the beginning, but for the past 6 months, yes. "How did you get these messages?" "I installed monitoring software on her phone during a legal department meeting. Technically illegal, but admissible as evidence if we handle this correctly." Rita gathered the documents and photos back into their folders. "The question now is what you want to do about it. What are my options?" Option 1. Do nothing. Let Corbin present his evidence tomorrow, get arrested for embezzlement, and hope that a jury believes your innocence over his documentation. That's not really an option. Option 2. We take everything I've gathered to the board tonight and expose the entire conspiracy before Corbin has a chance to implement his frame job. What kind of evidence do you have? Phone records, financial analysis, background research on Corbin's previous schemes, and testimony from employees at his former companies. Is it enough? It's enough to create reasonable doubt. Whether it's enough to prove your innocence depends on how well Corbin has prepared his case against you. I finished my bourbon and considered the situation. 6 hours ago, I had thought I was exposing my wife's affair and her boss's financial fraud. Now I was learning that I had been the target of an elaborate conspiracy designed to destroy my life and send me to prison. "There's a third option," Rita said quietly. "Which is? We let them think their plan is working, and we set a trap of our own." "What kind of trap?" "Corbin and Mira are planning to disappear before the investigation gets too deep. They have escape routes, new identities, offshore accounts. If we can document their flight, it becomes evidence of consciousness of guilt." "How do we do that?" "We let Corbin present his evidence tomorrow. We let him think he successfully framed you, and we follow them when they try to run." It was a dangerous plan. If something went wrong, I could end up in federal prison while the real criminals disappeared with stolen money. But it was also the only plan that offered a chance to expose the entire conspiracy and clear my name permanently. "What do you get out of this?" I asked. "Why are you helping me?" Rita's expression hardened. "Because I've seen what Corbin does to people. In Detroit, the logistics manager he framed lost his house, his family, and his freedom. He spent 3 years in prison for crimes he didn't commit. And you want to make sure that doesn't happen again." "I want to make sure Corbin Finlor finally pays for what he's done." She stood up and gathered her folders. "Think about it tonight, but don't think too long. Corbin's board presentation is scheduled for 9 a.m. "How do you know that?" "Because I'm the one who scheduled it." Rita headed for the door, then stopped and turned back toward me. "Brooks, be careful who you trust. Corbin has been building relationships at Meridian for 18 months. Some of those relationships run deeper than you might expect." "Meaning what?" "Meaning he might not be working alone." She left me sitting in the empty bar, surrounded by the wreckage of everything I thought I knew about my life. The bartender approached with a concerned expression. "Another round?" "Just the check," I said. I had a lot of thinking to do, and less than 7 hours to decide whether I was going to fight back or let myself become another victim of Corbin Finler's elaborate revenge scheme. Outside, the night air felt cold against my face as I walked back to my car. Riverton looked different now, not just quiet, but menacing. Like a place where people disappeared and no one asked questions. I drove home through empty streets, checking my rearview mirror for cars that might be following me. Rita's warning about trust echoed in my mind. If Corbin had been planning this for 18 months, he could have allies anywhere in the company, including on the board of directors. I didn't sleep. Instead, I spent the remaining hours before dawn researching everything I could find about Corbin Finler's previous companies. Rita's folders had provided a starting point, but I needed to understand the full scope of what I was facing. The pattern was even more disturbing than Rita had described. In each case, Corbin had arrived at struggling companies as a turnaround specialist, gained the trust of employees and board members, then systematically transferred company funds to accounts he controlled. The embezzlement was always discovered eventually, but by then Corbin had disappeared and left behind a carefully constructed trail of evidence pointing to someone else. The fall guys were always middle managers, people with enough access to be credible suspects, but not enough power to fight back effectively. And in every case, there had been a romantic relationship that provided both cover for the financial crimes and leverage over the eventual scapegoat. In Detroit, Corbin had seduced the logistics manager's wife. In Phoenix, it was the operations director's girlfriend. In Atlanta, the facilities manager's fiancée. The women weren't innocent victims. They were active participants who helped Corbin gain access to their partner's work accounts, personal information, and daily routines. Mira fit the pattern perfectly. At 6 a.m., I made coffee and called in sick to work. Whatever happened at the board meeting, I needed to be prepared for multiple scenarios. My phone rang at 6:47, Patricia Hendricks. "Brooks, I need you to come in early this morning. The board is meeting at 8:30, and we have additional questions about the financial irregularities." "What kind of questions?" "Questions that require your expertise in logistics and expense routing." Her tone was carefully neutral, but I could hear the tension underneath. Something had changed since last night. "I'll be there," I said. "Good. And Brooks? Don't discuss this meeting with anyone. The investigation is still confidential." She hung up before I could respond. I showered, dressed in my best suit, and prepared for what might be the most important meeting of my life. If Rita was right about Corbin's plan, the next few hours would determine whether I walked out of Meridian Industries as a whistleblower or in handcuffs as an accused embezzler. I arrived at the company headquarters at 8:15 a.m. The parking lot was unusually busy for early morning, with several cars I didn't recognize and what looked like a news van parked across the street. Word about last night's revelations was spreading. The lobby felt different too. Security guards were checking IDs more carefully, and employees were speaking in hushed tones as they hurried toward the elevators. The kind of atmosphere that develops when people know something big is happening, but don't understand what it means. I took the elevator to the executive floor and found Patricia Hendricks waiting outside the boardroom. "Brooks, thank you for coming in early." She looked like someone who had spent the night reviewing legal documents and drinking coffee. "Before we start the formal meeting, I want to give you an opportunity to clarify some information that's come to our attention." "What kind of information?" "Information that suggests the financial irregularities we discussed last night might be more complex than we initially understood." She led me into a smaller conference room adjacent to the main boardroom. David Chen and Michael Torres were already seated at the table, along with someone I didn't recognize, a woman in an expensive suit who had the unmistakable bearing of a federal investigator. "Brooks Carvin," Patricia said. "This is Agent Sarah Martinez from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division." My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. "Agent Martinez." "Mr. Carvin," she said, "we understand that you provided the board with access codes that revealed unauthorized executive spending. We appreciate your cooperation with the investigation." "I was fulfilling a board request for information." "Yes, we understand that. However, we've received additional information that raises questions about your own financial activities at Meridian Industries." Here it comes, I thought. Corbin's counterattack. Agent Martinez opened a laptop and turned it toward me. The screen displayed a series of financial transactions, purchase orders, expense transfers, and vendor payments that bore my authorization codes. "Can you explain these transactions?" she asked. I studied the screen, recognizing the same forged documents that Rita had shown me at Finch's bar. "I've never seen these before." "But that's your authorization signature on each document." "It appears to be, but I didn't sign these. I didn't approve these transactions." David Chen leaned forward. "Brooks, these documents show a pattern of unauthorized spending that goes back over a year. The amounts total nearly $400,000. $400,000? That was twice what Rita had mentioned. Money that was transferred to accounts outside the normal vendor payment system, Agent Martinez added. Accounts that appear to be connected to your personal financial information. "What do you mean, connected to my personal information?" She clicked to another screen that showed bank routing numbers, account details, and what looked like copies of my driver's license and social security card. "These accounts were opened using your identity," she said. "The money was transferred to these accounts over the past 18 months. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. Someone opened bank accounts using my identity without my knowledge. "That's certainly one possibility," Agent Martinez said. "Another possibility is that you opened these accounts yourself and are now claiming ignorance to avoid prosecution. Why would I provide you with evidence of Corbin's crimes if I was guilty of embezzlement myself? Perhaps because you knew the investigation was closing in and you wanted to deflect suspicion onto someone else." The room was quiet for several seconds. I could feel the weight of their suspicion, the careful way they were watching my reactions. "I want to see Corbin's response to these allegations," I said. Patricia and David exchanged glances. Mr. Findler is meeting with his attorney this morning, Patricia said. He's provided a preliminary statement claiming that he became suspicious of financial irregularities several months ago and has been quietly investigating the source. And he concluded that I was the source. He concluded that someone with access to expense routing systems was manipulating transactions for personal gain. Agent Martinez closed her laptop. Mr. Carvin, we're going to need you to remain available for additional questioning. Please don't leave the city without notifying our office. Am I under arrest? Not at this time, but I would strongly recommend that you contact an attorney. The meeting ended with handshakes that felt more like warnings. I was escorted back to the elevator by security, a not-so-subtle indication that my access to Meridian facilities was being restricted. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for several minutes, trying to decide what to do next. Corbin's plan was working perfectly. He had successfully positioned me as the primary suspect while painting himself as a concerned executive who had discovered the crimes. My phone buzzed with a text message from Rita Beck. How did it go? I called her instead of texting back. They have more evidence than you showed me last night, I said. Bank accounts, forged identity documents, transactions going back 18 months. How much money? $400,000. Rita was quiet for several seconds. That's more than I expected. Corbin has been busier than I realized. What do we do now? Now we implement Plan B. Which is? Meet me at the storage facility on Industrial Boulevard in 1 hour, Unit 247. Come alone and make sure you're not followed. Rita, what's going on? I'll explain when you get here. And Brooks, bring everything you have from your home office. Computer files, financial records, anything that might be relevant. She hung up before I could ask more questions. I drove home through increasingly heavy traffic, checking my mirrors for surveillance vehicles. If the FBI was treating me as a suspect, they might already be monitoring my movements. At home, I gathered my computer, backup drives, and every financial document I could find. Bank statements, tax returns, expense reports, anything that might help establish my innocence. As I was loading everything into my car, my neighbor Mrs. Patterson approached from across the street. Brooks, dear, is everything all right? There were some men here earlier asking questions about you and Mira. What kind of men? Official-looking men. They showed badges and asked about your schedules, your habits, whether you've been acting strangely lately. Federal agents had been canvassing my neighborhood. The investigation was moving faster than I had expected. What did you tell them? I asked. Nothing much to tell, really. You're both very quiet, keep to yourselves, although... She paused, looking uncomfortable. Although what? Well, I did mention that Mira has been gone quite a bit lately. Overnight trips, weekend absences. I thought perhaps she was caring for a sick relative. If only it were that innocent. Thank you for letting me know, I said. Brooks, you're not in any trouble, are you? I hope not, Mrs. Patterson. I really hope not. The storage facility was located in an industrial area on the outskirts of Riverton, surrounded by warehouses and trucking companies. Unit 247 was in the back section, away from the main office and foot traffic. Rita was waiting for me when I arrived, her car parked in the shadows between two larger units. Did anyone follow you? She asked. Not that I could tell. She unlocked the storage unit and raised the metal door. Inside was a small office setup, desk, computer, filing cabinets, and walls covered with documents, photographs, and what looked like a comprehensive investigation into Corbin Findler's criminal activities. Welcome to my real office, she said. I've been working out of here for the past 3 months. The walls told the story of Corbin's criminal career in detail. Photos of his previous victims, copies of forged documents, financial records showing the movement of stolen money, and what appeared to be surveillance photos of Corbin and Mira together. How did you get all this? I asked. Private investigators, former employees of his previous companies, and some creative interpretation of my legal access to company records. Is this legal? Probably not. but it's the only way to stop him. Rita pulled out a chair and gestured for me to sit down. Brooks, what I'm about to show you changes everything. She opened a file folder and spread its contents across the desk. Bank records, wire transfer receipts, and account statements that showed the movement of money from Meridian Industries to various offshore accounts. The $400,000 that was allegedly transferred to accounts in your name, she said. It never stayed in those accounts. It was immediately transferred to accounts controlled by Corbin and Mira. So the accounts in my name were just pass-throughs. Exactly. They needed a paper trail that led to you, but they also needed access to the actual money. She showed me additional documents that tracked the money's final destination. Accounts in the Cayman Islands registered to a company called Pacific Development Solutions. Pacific Development Solutions is owned by a shell corporation, which is owned by another shell corporation, which is ultimately controlled by Corbin Finlor. Can you prove that? I can prove the financial connections. But proving that Corbin controls the company requires access to international banking records that I can't obtain legally. So we still don't have enough evidence to clear my name. Not yet, but we will. Rita pulled out her phone and showed me a text message that had arrived 20 minutes earlier. Package delivered as requested. Flight confirmed for Thursday morning. What package? I asked. Corbin just received new identity documents and travel arrangements. He's planning to leave the country on Thursday. How do you know that? Because I'm the one who arranged for him to receive them. I stared at her, trying to understand what she was telling me. You're helping him escape? I'm helping him think he's escaping. The documents are fake, the travel arrangements are monitored, and every step of his escape route is being tracked. By who? By the same private investigators who helped me research his background, and by some federal contacts who are very interested in finally arresting Corbin Finlor. Rita's plan was more sophisticated than I had realized. She wasn't just trying to prove my innocence. She was orchestrating an elaborate sting operation designed to catch Corbin in the act of fleeing with stolen money. What do you need me to do? I asked. I need you to act like a man who's about to be arrested for embezzlement. Panic, make mistakes, do things that a guilty person would do. Such as? Try to access the accounts that were opened in your name. Contact the banks, demand information, act like you're trying to cover your tracks. Won't that make me look more guilty? It will make Corbin think his plan is working. And when people think their plans are working, they get careless. She handed me a list of phone numbers and account information. Call these banks this afternoon. Ask about the accounts, demand access, threaten legal action when they refuse. Make sure your calls are recorded. And then? Then we wait for Corbin to make his move. I studied the documents spread across the desk, trying to understand all the implications of what Rita was proposing. There's something else, she said quietly. Something I haven't told you yet. What? Mira isn't planning to leave with Corbin. What do you mean? I mean she's planning to testify against you in exchange for immunity from prosecution. The betrayal was complete. My wife hadn't just helped frame me for embezzlement. She was planning to send me to prison while she walked away free. How do you know that? Because she's already met with federal prosecutors twice this week. Rita showed me surveillance photos of Mira entering and leaving the federal building downtown, accompanied by a man in an expensive suit who was obviously her attorney. She's going to claim that you coerced her into helping you steal the money, that she was afraid of you, afraid to refuse your demands. They'll believe that? They'll believe whatever story is most convenient for their case. And right now, prosecuting you is much easier than prosecuting a CEO who's about to disappear to a non-extradition country. I felt like I was drowning in a conspiracy that grew more complex every time I thought I understood it. Rita, I said finally, why should I trust you? She looked at me for a long moment before answering. Because 3 years ago, my brother was the logistics manager at Corbin's company in Detroit. Your brother was the fall guy. My brother spent 3 years in federal prison for crimes he didn't commit. He lost his house, his family, and his career. When he got out, he couldn't find work, couldn't rebuild his life. Where is he now? He's gone, Brooks. The shame and the isolation were too much for him. Rita's voice was steady, but I could see the pain in her eyes. Corbin Finlor destroyed my brother's life, she said. I've spent the last 3 years making sure he doesn't destroy anyone else's. And if your plan doesn't work? Then you'll probably go to prison, and Corbin will disappear with enough money to start over somewhere else. That's not very encouraging. But it's honest, and honesty is the only thing I can offer you right now. I gathered the bank information and account numbers that Rita had given me. When do I make the calls? This afternoon. Make sure you sound desperate, angry, like someone who's trying to access money before the authorities freeze the accounts. And then? Then we wait to see if Corbin takes the bait. I left the storage facility with a clear understanding of what I was facing. I was caught between federal prosecutors who wanted to arrest me for embezzlement and a conspiracy designed to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. My only ally was a woman whose brother had been destroyed by the same man who was now targeting me, and my only hope was a plan that required me to act guilty in order to prove my innocence. It was the most dangerous gamble of my life. I spent Wednesday afternoon making the phone calls that Rita had requested, playing the role of a desperate man trying to access money before authorities could freeze the accounts. Each conversation was recorded. Each denial was met with increasingly frantic demands for information. By evening, I had created exactly the kind of evidence that prosecutors love, a clear pattern of suspicious behavior that suggested consciousness of guilt. Rita called me at 8 p.m. with an update. Corbin took the bait, she said. He's moved up his travel plans. He's leaving tomorrow morning instead of Thursday. How do you know? Because he just called the contact number I provided and requested immediate delivery of his travel documents. Where is he going? According to the fake itinerary I prepared, he's flying to Miami, then connecting to Grand Cayman. In reality, he'll be arrested the moment he tries to board the plane. What about Mira? She's meeting with prosecutors again tomorrow morning. She's going to formally agree to testify against you in exchange for immunity. The betrayal still stung, but I was beginning to understand that my marriage had been over long before last night's company party. Mira had chosen her side months ago when she agreed to help Corbin frame me. What do I do tomorrow? I asked. You go to work like nothing has changed. Act nervous, act guilty, but don't do anything that suggests you know about Corbin's travel plans. And if something goes wrong with your sting operation? Then you'll have about 6 hours to get out of the country before federal agents arrest you for embezzlement. That's reassuring. Brooks, I need you to understand something. What we're doing tomorrow is illegal in about 12 different ways. If we get caught, we'll both go to prison. Why are you willing to take that risk? Because I've seen what happens when Corbin gets away with it, and I've seen what happens to his victims. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of persistent drizzle that made everything look depressing. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that would be appropriate for either a normal day at work or a federal arrest. I arrived at Meridian at my usual time, checked my email, and tried to act like someone who was worried but not panicked. Around me, the office buzzed with rumors about the ongoing investigation, speculation about executive changes, and whispered conversations about who might be involved in the scandal. At 9:15 a.m., my phone rang. Patricia Hendricks. Brooks, I need you to come to the executive conference room immediately. Is this about the investigation? Just come up, please. I took the elevator to the executive floor, my heart pounding with each floor we passed. When the doors opened, I found 2 federal agents waiting for me. Mr. Carvin, Agent Martinez said, we have a few more questions for you. The conference room was set up like an interrogation, recording equipment, legal documents, and the kind of formal atmosphere that suggested this was no longer a friendly conversation. "Am I under arrest?" I asked. "Not at this time, but we do have some new information that we'd like you to address." Agent Martinez opened her laptop and showed me audio files from yesterday's phone calls. "Yesterday afternoon, you contacted several banks attempting to access accounts that were opened using your identity. Can you explain why you were trying to access those accounts?" I had prepared for this question. I wanted to understand what was happening. If someone was using my identity to open accounts, I thought I should find out how much damage they had done. "But you didn't contact the police about identity theft." "I was hoping to resolve it through the banks first. Mr. Carvin, these phone calls suggest that you were familiar with these accounts, that you expected to have access to them." I was frustrated and confused. I may not have expressed myself clearly. Agent Martinez played one of the recordings. My voice sounded desperate, angry, exactly like someone who was trying to access money that belonged to him. "Mr. Carvin, based on this evidence and the financial records we discussed yesterday, we have probable cause to arrest you for embezzlement, wire fraud, and money laundering. I want an attorney." "That's certainly your right. But before we proceed with formal charges, I want to give you one more opportunity to cooperate with our investigation." "What kind of cooperation?" "Information about your co-conspirators. Specifically, information about who helped you set up the offshore accounts and who assisted you in transferring the stolen funds." They were offering me the same deal they had offered Mira: immunity in exchange for testimony against my alleged partners. "I don't have any co-conspirators because I didn't commit any crimes." "Mr. Carvin, we have evidence that suggests otherwise. We have financial records, we have your phone calls from yesterday, and we have witness testimony from someone very close to you." Mira had already given them her statement. "What did she tell you?" I asked. "She told us that you coerced her into helping you access company financial systems, that you threatened her if she didn't cooperate, that she was afraid of what you might do if she reported your activities." The lies came so easily that I almost admired the performance. Mira had transformed herself from willing conspirator to innocent victim with a few carefully chosen words. "She's lying," I said. "Why would she lie? What would she gain by falsely accusing her own husband?" "You'd have to ask her." Agent Martinez closed her laptop. "Mr. Carvin, I'm going to be direct with you. We have enough evidence to convict you of multiple felonies. Your only chance of avoiding a lengthy prison sentence is to cooperate with our investigation." "And if I cooperate?" "Reduced charges, possibly probation instead of prison time." "What would I have to do?" "Provide us with information about the offshore accounts, help us track the movement of stolen funds, and testify about anyone who assisted you in the embezzlement scheme." It was a trap designed to make me implicate myself. Any cooperation would require me to admit guilt, and any information I provided would be used to strengthen their case against me. "I need time to think about it," I said. "You have until 5 o'clock this afternoon. After that, we proceed with formal charges." The meeting ended with the same handshakes and warnings as before. I was escorted back to the elevator, but this time I noticed that security guards followed me to my office and remained stationed outside my door. I was under surveillance. At my desk, I tried to work normally while monitoring my phone for updates from Rita. The morning dragged by with agonizing slowness, each minute bringing me closer to either vindication or arrest. At 11:30 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Package delivered. Departure confirmed." Corbin was on his way to the airport. At 12:15 p.m., another message. "Subject in custody. Package recovered." Corbin had been arrested. At 12:45 p.m., Rita called. "It's done," she said quietly. Corbin was arrested at the airport with fake identity documents and evidence of wire transfers to offshore accounts. What happens now? Now, we wait to see if he's willing to make a deal. What kind of deal? Information about his previous crimes in exchange for reduced charges, including information about what really happened at Meridian Industries. I felt a surge of hope for the first time in days. Will he take it? He's looking at federal charges for fraud, money laundering, and identity theft across multiple states. If he's smart, he'll cooperate. And if he doesn't, then we proceed with Plan C. Which is something I hope we won't need. At 2:30 p.m., Agent Martinez called. Mr. Carvin, we need to move up our meeting. Can you come to the federal building at 3 o'clock? Has something changed? We'll discuss it when you get here. The federal building was a fortress of concrete and glass that looked designed to intimidate anyone who entered. I went through security, surrendered my phone and keys, and was escorted to a conference room on the 4th floor. Agent Martinez was waiting with 2 other agents I hadn't met before, along with a federal prosecutor who introduced himself as Assistant U.S. Attorney James Walsh. Mr. Carvin, Walsh said, we've had some interesting developments in our investigation. What kind of developments? This morning, we arrested Corbin Finlor at the airport as he was attempting to flee the country with fraudulent identity documents. I tried to look surprised. Corbin was arrested? Mr. Finlor was carrying evidence that suggests the embezzlement scheme at Meridian Industries was significantly more complex than we initially understood. Walsh opened a briefcase and pulled out documents that looked familiar, the same offshore account records that Rita had shown me. It appears that the stolen funds were routed through multiple accounts before reaching their final destination in the Cayman Islands, accounts that were controlled by Mr. Finlor, not by you. I told you I didn't steal anything. Yes, you did, and it appears that you may have been telling the truth. Walsh spread additional documents across the table, bank records, wire transfer receipts, and what looked like correspondence between Corbin and offshore banking officials. Mr. Finlor has agreed to cooperate with our investigation in exchange for reduced charges. His cooperation includes providing information about how the embezzlement scheme was designed to frame you for his crimes. I felt like someone had just removed a crushing weight from my chest. What about Mira? Your wife's testimony appears to have been inconsistent with the evidence we've recovered. We're reviewing her statements for potential perjury charges. Is she under arrest? Not yet, but her immunity agreement has been revoked pending further investigation. Walsh gathered the documents and returned them to his briefcase. Mr. Carvin, you're free to go. We apologize for any inconvenience this investigation may have caused you. Inconvenience, like being framed for embezzlement, was a minor scheduling conflict. What happens to Corbin? Mr. Finlor will be prosecuted for fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Based on his cooperation and the evidence we've recovered, he's looking at significant prison time. And Mira? That depends on the extent of her involvement in the conspiracy. If she was a willing participant, she'll face charges. If she was coerced, she may avoid prosecution. I knew which one was true, but I also knew that proving it would be difficult. I left the federal building as a free man, but the victory felt incomplete. Corbin would go to prison, but Mira might escape consequences for her role in the conspiracy. Outside, Rita was waiting by my car. How did it go? She asked. Corbin confessed. I'm cleared of all charges. And Mira? Still under investigation. Rita nodded. That's probably the best we could hope for. Is it over? It's over for you. Whether it's over for her depends on how much evidence the prosecutors can develop. I got into my car and sat for several minutes, trying to process everything that had happened. 2 days ago, I had been a married man with a stable job and a predictable life. Now I was single, unemployed, and facing an uncertain future. But I was free. Rita knocked on my car window. There's something else you should know. I rolled down the window. What? The storage unit where I've been working? It's registered under your name. What does that mean? It means that if anyone asks, you've been conducting your own investigation into Corbin's background. You've been gathering evidence, building a case, preparing to expose the conspiracy. Why would that matter? Because it makes you look like a victim who fought back instead of a target who got lucky. She handed me a key and a folder full of documents. Everything is organized, documented, and ready for review. If anyone questions how you knew to investigate Corbin, you have a complete paper trail. I took the key and the folder. Rita, why did you really do all this? I told you, because of what happened to my brother. But there's more to it than that, isn't there? She was quiet for a moment. My brother wasn't just Corbin's victim. He was my twin brother. We were close, closer than most siblings. When he went to prison, I lost the most important person in my life. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just make sure this never happens to anyone else. She walked away, leaving me with a car full of evidence and a future full of possibilities. I drove home through the same streets I had traveled the night before, but everything looked different now. Brighter, cleaner, full of potential instead of threats. At home, I poured a bourbon and sat in my office, surrounded by the documents that had saved my life. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the sun was beginning to break through the clouds. My phone rang. Mira. I let it ring. She called back immediately, then again. On the fourth attempt, I answered. Brooks, we need to talk. I don't think we do. You don't understand what really happened. I never wanted any of this. You testified against me to federal prosecutors. You tried to send me to prison. I was scared. Corbin said if I didn't cooperate, we would both go to prison. So you decided to sacrifice me instead. I thought you would be okay. I thought your lawyer would be able to prove your innocence. The lies came so easily that I wondered if she actually believed them. Mira, it's over. The marriage, the conspiracy, all of it. It's over. Brooks, please. We can work this out. We can start over. No, we can't. I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside, the sun was shining for the first time in days. I had work to do, finding a new job, rebuilding my life, deciding what kind of future I wanted to create. But for the first time in months, the future looked like something worth building. The company party that had ended my marriage had also saved my life. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best revelations, and sometimes the only way to win is to let your enemies destroy themselves. I raised my glass of bourbon toward the window, toasting the end of one life and the beginning of another. To new beginnings, I said to the empty room. This time, I meant it.